Okay, it's lovely to have you both here to actually interview for the Pilgrim's Teacher Training Journal. So, and I'm really pleased to welcome you, Amal, and also Richard. As you know, as readers of the journal probably have seen, there was a review of the book Decentering ELT in the last issue, and so we're very pleased that we can explore a bit more about what the book involves and how it can be used. So, if perhaps we could just start by saying a few words about yourself, about and something in terms of your recent current work, which I'm sure our readers would be pleased to hear about. So, Amal, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and I'm pleased to be here talking to the potential audience from Teacher Training Journal. I'm currently working in Delhi at a university and heading the Center for English Language Education, but I had been a teacher, educator, and trainer for nearly 35 years. And I also had been associated with various teacher communities and teacher associations for nearly 25 years now. And my core interests lie in teacher development and history of English language education, language policies, and of course, decentering ELT.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, myself, I've been at the University of Warwick for how long? 23 years now, in what's now called the Department of Applied Linguistics. It used to be called the Centre for English Language Teacher Education. And so my main work has been teaching MA TESOL students, teachers from many different parts of the world. Before that, I was in Japan, so I was involved in some teacher education for Japanese students who were going to become teachers in Japanese schools. Before that, I was an English teacher in Japan. Yeah, so that's me.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'm sure we all. I mean, the teacher trainers, teacher educators I work with, and we're all inspired about the work we do, really. And I think that this is to a large extent what helps us to do what we do. So I just wonder. I mean, you obviously you've worked in different contexts. So I just like to ask you. I mean, what kind of inspires you? But what has also brought you to actually work on this book? Yeah.
For me, in general, education inspires me because it has the potential to shape the lives of people and communities. But more specifically about English teachers, what I find inspiring is the resilience of teachers and teacher communities to work in the face of inevitably existing challenges. Everywhere teaching and learning of English is full of challenges, and how people cope with those challenges, typically with their local resources and their local wisdom. And I find that inspiring. Richard and I had been doing things together for over 2 decades now, though my first introduction to Richard was a scholar of the Hornby Trust scholarship that I got, and Richard was a trustee. But then later on, our paths crossed so many times in so many different roles. So we have done so many interesting things together, right from teacher research, teacher communities to decentering, and then a fellow trustee on the Hornby Trust. So our common interests and I think common values bring us together. And we had really, at least I had fascinating time working with Richard.
Yeah, same with me, Amal. I would highlight my work with teachers in relatively difficult circumstances. We might say countries of the global south, especially in public education systems. So I've been really privileged to have more and more contact with such teachers over these last 20 years. I'll focus on that, although of course I get a lot of pleasure from teaching my students, many of them who haven't taught before at Warwick. I think my sort of main interests have shifted really towards those teachers who are still in their context and not coming to us at Warwick, but through different reasons partly the Hornby Trust, projects and things with the Hornby Trust, which does focus on developing countries, but also things I've done with the British Council, some of them with Emil, reaching teachers in large classes, low resource contexts, through things like teacher research. Emil and I did a workshop, it's more than 10 years ago, for the Hornby Trust and the British Council on teaching in low resource classrooms. And I think, those working with those teachers has been very, very fulfilling, and being directly in touch with them and seeing some change in their teaching and in their motivation through the work we've been doing, I hope.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's kind of focus in a bit on the actual book as well now, Decentering ELT. So I wonder if you can just define really what, how you understand the concept, and maybe just say a little bit more about the background to the publication and what it involves. Emil, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll just mention the background a little, and maybe Richard will come in with the notion of decentering. This is an initiative more than 4 years old now, in which the Hornby Trust encouraged and supported a small group of academics primarily, who were interested in looking at how people and education systems understood decentering. And one key aspect of that has been to, on the one hand, explore the very notion of decentering. And I'm sure Richard will agree that we are still struggling to arrive at one exhaustive, comprehensive definition of decentering. And at the moment, over these 4 years of work, our understanding is that decentering is something that has so many different strands and aspects depending on different contexts. But broadly speaking, it is an initiative whereby people try to counter those tendencies wherein certain kinds of knowledge or certain systems of working, or more specifically in terms of ELT, certain ways of teaching English or certain resources of material or certain kinds of expertise is privileged over others. And more specifically speaking, the resources, materials, methods, expertise emanating from English-speaking countries is propagated as superior kinds of things, which people from global south or in other contexts should follow as the best methods or the best materials or the best approach. And those tendencies ultimately result in not only downplaying the value and importance of local wisdom and local expertise, it also de-skills teachers. And the worrying part is it leads to practices and approaches which are contextually not relevant and lead to failures in ensuring good learning of English. As I said earlier, teachers have so many challenges, and one of the challenges is the immense pressure they have to work with, the pressure of the aspiration of people. So everywhere in the global south in particular, English is seen as a matter of huge aspiration, and therefore everyone wants to develop good competence of English. And ironically, the so-called best methods or practices coming from the center do not work. So decentering is an initiative that works along two strands. On the one hand, to enhance, deepen our understanding of the notion and the practice of decentering, and on the other hand, to identify actual examples from practice where we can see decentering happening. In the first phase of this initiative, the focus was on teacher associations, and several teacher associations shared their practices, which indicated the way they were trying to ensure decentering. The one event that brought many of those practices together for wider dissemination was the first decentering conference that took place year before last. This book is an outcome of that conference, wherein we gathered all those stories and practical examples, as well as perceptions reported by people in the run-up to the conference and in the conference itself. Would you like to add something, Richard?
I think you've covered it very well, Emil. Just to stress actually something that you've said, which is that decentering ELT is not a new methodology of any kind. It's not a new teaching methodology. It's not equivalent to sort of pedagogy for autonomy or something like that. It isn't, as Emil said, it's an initiative. It's basically a sort of train of thought. We've been, and another thing to say is that it's not new, really, this way of thinking. It's been around for like more than 30, 40 years. People like Adrian Holiday, Robert Phillipson, of course, with critiques of centre, UK, maybe USA, sort of domination of materials, methods, etc. It's nothing new in a sense, but it's still important. That's what we feel on the basis of experience with projects, with teachers in different developing country contexts, still feel that there are methods and materials which are being imposed from the outside or from the top down. So it's reflecting really what work that we were doing within the Hornby Trust, and trying to just take it a little bit further and be more explicit about basing work, basing thinking, basing ideas for teaching and materials for teaching on local expertise, building from the bottom up. So as Amal said, it's involved trying to think together what decentering ELT might mean, having come up with this sort of slogan. So that's not fixed. It's nothing fixed, although we might nowadays call it something like valuing and seeking to understand how teachers, often collaborating with each other, I'm just reading from the website, try to articulate key features of their work and ways they feel their practice can be improved. And it highlights teachers' own development of contextually appropriate thinking and action in relation to the needs of their local context. So that is our most recent sort of characterization, but it is under critique always. And the other aspect, as Tamal said, was to identify practices, especially recently teacher association practices, which might sort of be consistent, and then to share and spread awareness of those without becoming a new center. That's an important thing for us to be aware of and to worry about.
Okay, thank you very much. And that really explains a lot, and very, very helpful. And of course, in the book, you talk about practice and actually possibilities. I just wonder, have you got? Is there any examples you might like to share of it being applied in different local contexts?
Richard, Richard, can you quote something?
In the book, we do have a number of examples, sort of stories, really, of teacher associations, because that has been a major focus of Hornby Trust work, is to support teacher associations in different countries, and interesting things that they are doing. APIBA, for example, in Argentina, based in Buenos Aires, in the city of Buenos Aires, but going out deliberately to regions within Buenos Aires, the wider province of Buenos Aires, to organize workshops where they would explicitly try to identify local expertise and have sharing of local successes. Camelta in Cameroon, sending out questionnaires to their members, deliberately asking people to state their own priorities, and trying to elicit their own successes, expertise. I'm looking here at INET. What would you say about INET in India?
So INET also encouraged its teacher members to explore their own classrooms and supported them to investigate their own concerns specific to their own classrooms, and then work out some ways of addressing them on their own. So there was no ready-made solution provided from outside, or no frameworks of investigation imposed on them, or not even questions imposed on them. So everything organically came bottoms up, and teachers not only chose to bring out their own concerns, but also worked on them in their own specific concrete classroom context. And developed certain ways of working around them. On the one hand, this not only enhanced their understanding of their problems, but also developed their ability to, on the one hand, inquire systematically into their concerns, and on the other hand, to devise their own solutions, because the general understanding they developed was there cannot be universal solutions to very specific individual problems of each classroom. So that was an instance of decentering, we would say.
Can I share a couple more examples?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Please do.
They
Yeah.
are very inspiring, I think. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
in some African teacher associations, in Rwanda, for example, they are developing these communities of practice, and I know that that's a British Council sort of initiative these days, but actually it's developed almost organically within some teacher associations. And so local, because they can't travel to a conference in the capital city, developing local meetings, the communities of practice. Another thing was in Nepal, organizing a success story conference. So trying to change the idea of plenary speakers coming from outside to give talks. Instead, inviting teachers to stand up and talk about recent successes in their experience and have interaction around that. That was an interesting initiative that we have been happy to share with others as well.
Okay. I like very much what you say about it being as a concept, being something that is kind of evolving and changing, and I think that's the way it has to be. I mean, a lot of my work, for want of a better term, is in kind of EDI and kind of in equality, diversity, inclusion, which can be a buzzword as well in the concept. But I just wonder how much you think what you're doing might be a contribution to an approach to EDI.
So there are, if we look at the stories about the status of English across the world, those stories reflect how people have very strong aspirations from English. But on the other hand, they also show how there is a divide between English haves and English have-nots. And there is also this issue of delivering what people want in an effective way. So if there are millions of learners trying to learn English and maybe live a better life through better employment, career, whatever, what they need is to have an effective way of developing their competence. But what typically happens is the pedagogic practices and policies and materials and even assessment schemes are all influenced by ideas coming from the center, which are usually not relevant, not practicable, and not delivering. Decentering is a way out of that, where teachers take a very critical stance on these kinds of ideas and action frameworks coming from outside. Try to critically analyze them and see what is relevant to them. And on the other hand, to look at the locally available wisdom and expertise, the local resources, the local needs and interests, and then work out their own practice, their own pedagogic practice through this kind of critical approach. So in that sense, what they will be doing is has got to be more inclusive, more diverse. And I think that is one concrete way in which decentering can directly contribute to all the EDI initiatives.
Yeah, diversity of thinking. I mean, it's opposing the idea of one size fits all in terms of materials, methods. It's recognizing that contexts are so diverse and solutions for that reason have to be locally constructed. Of course, with input from outside, but recognizing the fundamental sort of expertise of teachers in their own context as the people who can best come up with local solutions, ideally, with the support of one another. So I mean, collaboration is important, and where relevant, where those people in that context see it as relevant, the support and input from outside. Inclusion. It's interesting, actually. Equality and inclusion I'll just address, because we have, through our discussions, we have had many discussions with teachers and local teacher associations around this notion of decentering. It's not something we want to just send out into the world. We want to take account of people's views, and I think encouraging that all the way through the book. And we hope it's based on this sort of acknowledgement of what's coming to us, as it were. So one thing we came to realize, I think, more and more, was that centres are not located necessarily just geographically, sort of in the UK and the USA. That's a rather perhaps crude way of thinking of it, that there are centres locally. Academic centres, universities may set themselves up as more powerful, more knowledgeable than teachers, for example. Ministries of education may do the same. They do that. So in teacher associations, leaderships may do the same. They may be sort of dominating other teachers. And so the example of CAMELTA actually going out and eliciting members' views, I think, was quite important from the point of view of inclusion. So just one other example, we became more and more aware of sort of gender imbalances within teacher associations, tending, maybe not always, but often, to be male leaderships. And this came to our attention through the voices of some members, of women who expressed this idea that leaderships can decenter even within the teacher associations, that to include more women, for example, in the leadership positions. So, and that has actually led to some interesting initiatives, I think, around gender and female equality.
So can I add something while we are on this topic of EDI? It relates to another aspect, that is languages. And it's my first-hand experience in India, being a very rich multilingual country, and I suspect there are analogous situations in other places as well. So this very uneasy relationship of English with other local languages, hundreds of mother tongues and scores of mediums of instruction. In all these cases, one of the critically problematic stance came from the centrist tendencies for long, because the English language teaching policies were broadly informed and influenced by the Western approaches for quite some time. And examples such as, or I would say trends such as monolingualism in the English classroom, no other languages allowed, or looking at other local languages as interference in the learning of English, or the native speakerism in recruiting teachers. Those are the kinds of trends which were counterproductive. And I think decentering tries to counter those trends, and that way it strongly promotes EDI.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is really important. I mean, I've always in my work regard EDI fundamentally, an issue of kind of a rights-based one and kind of social justice as much as anything else. And I think what you're saying about multiple languages is so important. Yeah, I mean, I remember the days as well of English only, and never to have any interference. And but I think that we're more and more recognizing how important that all language classes, whatever they are actually multilingual, and using the best of that is so important. I suppose related to that as well is while of course this is focused on English language teaching, is if what you think might be the implications for kind of wider education really as well, if any. Yeah.
Richard, would you like to go first?
No, not really, because it's not really something that we've thought about. I've thought about.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
We have been very focused on English teachers, just through the work, the kind of focus that we have. I do know that some of the initiatives around, for example, teacher research is something I've been personally, and I know Amal has been very interested in other areas, but it's also come into this Decentering ELT initiative because some of the projects which we've identified have involved engaging teachers within the associations in researching their practice in appropriate sort of forms of inquiry into practice, and then sharing that with other teachers. And sometimes that has involved with English teachers taking the lead. It has involved teachers of other subjects in their schools. In fact, I'm just thinking on my feet or on my chair really, but I did. I think. Has anybody mentioned the pandemic? Yes. Well, no, Amal didn't mention, but he mentioned the resourcefulness that we all can recognise in teachers during the pandemic, and that was a time of really teachers thinking on their feet, you know, and coming up with many resourceful solutions to problems which arose, which couldn't have been predicted, and which were not their solutions were not dependent on the training they could receive at that point, or the ministries deciding on what to do. It showed teachers' resourcefulness, and it showed teachers the value of teachers' own expertise, I think. And I think that when teachers did start to share their ideas during the pandemic through English teachers, through things like Zoom webinars that were being set up, it seems to me that many English teachers actually took the lead in their own contexts after hearing ideas from other teachers in other contexts. So there is this aspect of, I think, sharing among teachers, sharing between teachers, including internationally, which is part of, I think, what we are interested in.
Okay, anything you'd like to add, Amal?
Yeah, probably putting this on more abstract and general terms. Centering is more easily discernible, very obviously visible in ELT for historical, geographical, and political reasons, but it's not exclusive to ELT alone. So the tendencies of centering are found everywhere in all aspects of education. So decentering has value and potential for any branch of education, I would say, but more prominently and more urgently for ELT.
Okay, thank you. And just to kind of end, I think, is there anything else you'd like to add that might be helpful and supportive for the teams you work with, or the teams you might work with in the future, in what they could do in applying this concept? I mean, they're probably doing it anyway, but I just wonder if, just anything you'd like to say. Yeah.
So I would like to say three things. So one is the first thing that we need to do is to raise our own awareness about our own status and the kinds of narratives we receive and the kind of practices and approaches that are brought to us. Secondly, we need to be aware of what capabilities we have and what our needs are and what our local needs and interests are, and be critical about whatever we need to apply in our own practice. And finally, I would say we need to be responsive and responsible both. Because when I say we, I'm specifically referring to teachers of English. So we need to be responsive and responsible both in terms of who we are working for and what we want to achieve in what circumstances. And when we are called upon to teach our students, then we have to handle all kinds of challenges and pressures. Many of those centering things work below the surface, and we are not always very conscious of what we are doing and what we are receiving and how we are perceiving things and how we are applying them. So awareness raising on the one hand, and then taking a critical stance and adapting things in response to our local needs and using culturally, contextually appropriate, suitable ways of doing and ideas. That, I think, is the bottom line of a decentering approach. Wherever we find this happening, we should try to share those things. And if we develop ideas and get insights, we should share them with others.
Okay, thank you.
If I may just add, yes, that just to emphasize really that this decentering ELT slogan or phrase is not intended as any kind of prescription or new sort of magic solution or anything like that, although it can obviously be interpreted in that way. But I would just encourage the viewers to actually look at the book. It is freely available. It's meant to be a reader-friendly book. It may sound quite abstract in the way we've been talking about it, but it is actually full of cases, examples from teacher associations, and I'd like that impression to leave that impression, hopefully, that it's a way of describing experiences which we've been involved with Amal over a number of years, but also it's a very collaborative venture. Although Amal and I have edited this book, it's involved others who've been leading this initiative. It's also involved a lot of consultation, which we try to make clear in the book itself, how we've been getting views and getting opinions from many places. And it will continue to be that kind of initiative. We want it to be open for debate, as I hope we've emphasized, also to be very practice oriented. So the book is practical. Just one more thing, since we've been working in this area with the slogan Decentering ELT, other sort of decolonizing the curriculum, decolonizing ELT has come up as a phrase more and more. Also, issues of social justice that you mentioned are very much in the sort of center discourse, if you like, professional discourse, and this allies with them. It's not meant to replace them or at all. It's just they weren't in the discourse so much when we thought of the phrase decentering ELT. But I think what you will find in the book is quite practically oriented material. Sometimes some of these movements seem to be quite academic, and we're trying not to be in this book at all. Finally, just to say, well, we have been focusing on teacher associations, what they can do with their members in this area, but we are interested in moving really into thinking about teacher education more broadly and seeing how the idea of decentering ELT may relate to teacher education, pre-service teacher education and in-service teacher education. I think Hornby Trust will continue to be exploring in that area. So we're looking forward to hearing from viewers about what they think, and there are questions in the book for discussion, for reflection, which I hope will encourage that kind of critical reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I certainly look forward to seeing how the ideas develop, and I'm sure the readers of the journal and those watching this video will as well. So thank you very much for your time, and that's great.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.